The current political climate in the United States is more tense than ever due to a partial government shutdown stemming from President Trump's request for over $5 billion in funds to erect a border wall. The following illustration frames the issues involved with the wall in its actual terms. Despite what the media is saying, this is not about Democrat versus Republican. In short, the executive branch of our government is threatening to declare a national emergency, since the legislative branch will not authorize the seizure of private American property for a federal works project, nor will fund it. The executive branch has already shut down the federal government. It is currently threatening to extend this government shutdown for however long it takes for the legislative branch to cave. Let us break this down. First of all, the framework of our government is based on checks and balances. Power is divided into three branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. The legislative branch controls the purse strings of government and creates laws. The executive branch carries out those laws. The judicial branch tells us whether the laws are constitutional or not. Each branch was designed to be able to balance the other branches. Why? As shown by our original rebellion, Americans didn't want a king or a dictator when we were setting up our government. We were not particularly thrilled with the House of Lords telling us what we could or could not do either. In this case, the executive branch wants to 1. Take governmental cash. 2. Create its own law. 3. Take away private property from American citizens. 4. Create its own federal works project. At least 3 of these functions fall within the power responsibility of the legislative branch. So what's the problem? This is one of the most naked power grabs by the executive branch over the others in recent history. Once that power is exercised, it is going to be difficult or impossible to regain any balance again. The executive branch was never meant to have that much power. See our country's previous concerns about kings and dictators. Is this constitutional? Very doubtful. Should all Americans be concerned? That is a question for you to answer yourself. Second, a national emergency is generally declared under these general conditions. 1. Natural disasters including hurricanes, tornadoes, and earthquakes, to name a few. 2. Public health emergencies such as significant outbreaks of infectious diseases. 3. Military attacks. 4. Civil insurrection. 5. Any unusual and extraordinary threat which has its source in whole or substantial part outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, or economy. Now, the first 4 aren't applicable. The last category was meant to be short-term only. It was designed to be reviewed by the legislative branch every year after it's enacted, because again, the check and balance is fundamental to how we operate. So what is the problem here? If national emergencies can be declared by the executive branch for non-emergency purposes which vest power in one branch of the government, why would that branch ever let go of that power again? Third, the seizure of private property, known as eminent domain, a body of law which says the government cannot just take your home without due process. You're joking, right? No. The U.S.-Mexican border is 1,933 miles long. It runs through 4 states: California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Only 33% of that land is actually owned or managed by the federal government. A sizable percentage of that land is owned by the Indian nations. It is land preserved for those tribes, those Native American tribes, by treaty, and land given under treaty is not land owned by the United States. These tribes already have a lot of reasons to be angry at the federal government. This would be pouring additional gas on an open flame. The other 64% of that land is privately owned. How much land would have to be taken? The amount of land that the federal government would have to take would likely run 1,237 miles long to 12,371 miles deep, assuming a 1 to 10 mile DMZ from the border into the United States. Even if we could only take 100 to 500 feet of land in densely populated areas, that is a lot of private property that is going to be seized by the federal government. The land necessary for this project would also run through some highly populated areas in the U.S. such as San Diego, Calexico, Nogales, El Paso, and Laredo. There will be a lot of Americans who are going to have their homes and businesses taken by the federal government, which will also mean a lot of lawsuits. In terms of the federal works project, these types of works include hospitals, bridges, highways, walls, and dams. These projects may be funded by local, state, or federal appropriations. If they are federal, they are funded by the legislative branch of our government, the same branch that our executive branch is currently trying to take power from. Is the seizure of power constitutional? Not likely, given the separation of powers discussed above. Finally, these considerations do not take into account the sheer cost, human and monetary, that will be involved. The Department of Homeland Security estimates the current cost at $21 billion for construction alone, not counting costs of maintenance or costs associated with increased military federal patrolling. Ask yourself a simple question. When was the last time that you saw a governmental project brought in under time and under budget? Does anyone remember the Big Dig in Boston, Mass? The actual costs are likely to be much higher. This estimated cost also does not include compensating folks for taking their land or the associated impact upon their businesses. The federal budget deficit grew to $779 billion in 2018, according to the Treasury Department. How are we as a country going to fund this project? How are we as a country going to deal with the additional debt? Unlike private businesses, our country cannot declare bankruptcy. This is not about Democrat versus Republican. It is not about who has the best zingers measured in 10-second sound bites. It is about our country. The core of this issue deals with the profound and immense changes the outcome will have on the structure of our nation. This is the way that we, as a country, should be framing these issues. Please think about it. This is an audiovisual rendering of a post from a Facebook account holder.